Milwaukee, July 22nd, 1991. It's a few minutes before midnight, and a man is walking down the middle of a quiet street with a handcuff hanging off one wrist. His name is Tracy Edwards. He's 32 years old, and right now he is trying to flag down a car. When a police cruiser finally slows beside him, the two officers see a man with no shirt on, one steel cuff locked around his wrist, the other end swinging loose. He's out of breath. He's talking fast, and what he's telling them is simple. A man just tried to kill him. A man who put a knife to him, who wouldn't let him leave, who told him he wanted to cut out his heart. The officers ask him where. Edwards points back the way he came, toward an apartment building a couple of blocks off. Second floor, apartment 213. In a few minutes, these two officers are going to walk through that door. As far as they know, they're clearing up a strange call, a bad night, maybe a fight between two men that got out of hand. They have no idea whose door they're about to knock on, and to understand what they're about to find in there, you have to go back a few hours and stay with Tracy Edwards from the beginning. Earlier that evening, Tracy Edwards is out in Milwaukee. At some point, he ends up talking to a quiet, ordinary-looking white guy in his early 30s. Nothing about the man stands out. He's soft-spoken, a little awkward, easy to be around. He says his name is Jeff, and Jeff makes him an offer that, on the surface, doesn't sound like much. Come back to my place, pose for a few photos, and I'll pay you $100 for it. Have a couple of drinks while you're there. On an ordinary night for a lot of people, that's a small, easy yes. So, Edwards goes with him back to a building on North 25th Street, up to a small apartment on the second floor, apartment 213. The first thing that hits him is the smell. Edwards would later say that the moment the door opened, there was a stench in the place that he couldn't explain. There are boxes stacked around. There's a large plastic drum against one wall. Dahmer has an answer ready for the smell, the way he always does, and Edwards lets it go. Dahmer gets him a drink. He puts a horror movie on the television, and the two of them sit down. And for a little while, it's just a strange, uncomfortable evening in a stranger's apartment. Then it changes. Dahmer goes quiet. His whole manner shifts, and with almost no warning, he clicks a handcuff shut around one of Edwards' wrists. He tries to close the second cuff and can't get it to lock. But by then there's a knife in his hand, a long one, and he's telling Edwards that he is not leaving. He makes Edwards sit and watch the screen. At one point, Edwards would later say, Dahmer leaned in, put his head against his chest, and told him he wanted to listen to his heart because he was going to eat it. This goes on for hours. Edwards would describe close to 4 hours of it, down on the floor, one wrist cuffed, that knife never far from Dahmer's hand, the movie droning in the background. He asked, more than once, to use the bathroom, partly for a few feet of space, partly to buy himself time to think. And the whole time he was watching the knife, watching Dahmer's body, the way he'd rock and drift and then snap back, waiting for the pattern to give him something. And here is the thing that actually saves Tracy Edwards' life. He doesn't fight. He understands fast that the second he struggles, he's dead. So he does the opposite of what his body is screaming at him to do. He stays calm. He agrees with everything. He tells this man what he wants to hear. He calls him a friend. He keeps him talking, keeps him relaxed, and he waits. He waits for the one moment when Dahmer's attention drifts, when the man is rocking a little, half watching the movie, not watching him. When it comes, Edwards does two things almost at once. He swings, hits Dahmer hard across the face, and he runs for the door. He gets the locks open. He gets out. He goes down the stairs half-dressed, out into the street, and he keeps moving until he sees headlights. Which brings us back to a squad car slowing down, and a man with a handcuff on his wrist saying the words no officer expects to be true. A man just tried to kill me. So the officers drive Edwards back, and they go up to 213, and they knock. The door opens, and the man standing there is not what they braced for. He's calm. He's polite. He apologizes for the trouble. There's been a misunderstanding, he tells them. A disagreement between him and the guy who just ran off. Nothing they need to worry about. The officers ask about the handcuff. They want the key so they can get it off Edwards' wrist. Dahmer says, "Sure, it's in the bedroom. He'll go get it." And that small, ordinary request is the thing that unravels him. Because one of the officers, Rolf Muller, doesn't wait in the doorway. He steps inside, and he goes to look for the key himself. In the bedroom, he opens a drawer. Inside are photographs, more than 70 of them, Polaroids, and they are not of a party or a vacation. They are photographs of men and of parts of men, bodies posed, bodies taken apart. Muller looks at them, and it takes a second for it to land, and then it lands. These aren't staged. These aren't a sick joke. They're real, and they were taken right here in this apartment, he calls out to his partner, Robert Routh. And the mood in that room turns over completely. Whatever calm Dahmer had been holding on to is gone. The officers take him down to the floor and put him under arrest. Until Muller opened that drawer, they'd come to do two small things: look into an assault and get a handcuff off a frightened man's wrist. Now they knew they were standing inside something much larger. And then they start actually looking at the place they're standing in. One of them opens the refrigerator, and whatever doubt was left about what kind of case this was ends there. Within the hour, the block is sealed off. Squad cars, crime scene units, reporters, neighbors standing in the street in the dark. By morning, this is no longer a strange assault call, and it isn't a single homicide either. It's something much bigger and much older than anyone on that street understands yet. Because the man they've just arrested is 31 years old. His name is Jeffrey Dahmer, and he has been doing versions of this, on and off, for 13 years. Which raises the only question that matters now. Who was he? And how does a man kill for that long in the middle of a major American city without anyone stopping him? To answer that, we have to leave this apartment and go a long way back. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960, in Milwaukee. His family eventually settled in Bath, Ohio, a quiet, wooded township outside Akron, in a house set back near the trees. By most accounts, the home was tense. His father, Lionel, was a chemist who spent long hours at work. His mother, Joyce, struggled with her health and with the marriage, and there was a lot of conflict in the house. When Jeffrey was 6, he got a younger brother, David. As a boy, Jeffrey was withdrawn. He had classmates, not really close friends. And somewhere in there, he developed a fixation that the people around him noticed and didn't know what to do with. He was drawn to dead things. He'd collect roadkill, animals he found out along the roads near the house, and he'd take them apart to see how they were put together and keep the bones. By high school, he was drinking, heavily and early in the day. Classmates remembered him as odd, a loner who'd sometimes act out for attention and then disappear back into himself. Now, it's worth being careful here, because this is exactly the point in a story like this, where people reach for a clean explanation. His father would later go back through his own memory, looking for the moment it all turned. Some accounts have raised the possibility that Jeffrey was harmed as a child, but nothing like that was ever established, and plenty of lonely, troubled kids grow up carrying far worse and never hurt anyone. So, this isn't a map to a monster, it's just the background. Two things about these years do matter, though, because Dahmer himself talked about them later. The first is that his fantasies were already forming, and they weren't really about sex. They were about control, about having someone who couldn't leave. He would later tell investigators that, as a teenager, he once took a wooden bat, hid near the road, and waited for a jogger he'd been watching, meaning to attack him. The man didn't come by that day, and nothing happened. But the thought was already there. The second is that around this time he understood he was gay, and that in that place, in those years, he felt he had to hide it. And it's important to say this plainly, because the story got twisted this way for decades. Being gay is not why Jeffrey Dahmer killed people. What set him apart was never who he was attracted to. It was that what he wanted was a person he could keep. Then, in the spring of 1978, his home fell apart. His parents' marriage ended. His mother left and took his younger brother with her. His father had already moved out, and for a stretch that summer, through a mix-up over who was where, 18-year-old Jeffrey Dahmer was left alone in that house. And that is where it starts. June 18th, 1978. 3 weeks after his high school graduation, Dahmer is out driving in the afternoon heat when he passes a young man with his thumb out on the side of the road. His name is Stephen Hicks. He's 18 years old, and he's trying to get to a rock concert. Dahmer pulls over. He offers him a ride, a few beers, a place to hang out for a while. And Stephen, on a summer afternoon at the start of his life, says yes. They go back to the empty house. They drink. They talk. They put on music. For a while, it's just two teenagers killing an afternoon. And then Stephen says he has to go. He needs to get home. Dahmer doesn't want him to leave. He would later describe what he did next in flat, matter-of-fact terms. As Stephen sat in a chair, Dahmer picked up a dumbbell, struck him from behind, and then killed him. Stephen Hicks was the first person Jeffrey Dahmer ever killed, and he was 18 years old. What comes after is an 18-year-old alone in a house with a body and no plan. He hides the remains. He panics. And late that night, he loads what's left into his car to drive out and get rid of it. On the way, he gets pulled over. A patrol officer stops him on a rural road in the middle of the night. Dahmer is sweating, nervous, and there are trash bags in his car. He talks his way through it. He's told he was over the center line. He passes a sobriety check, and the officer lets him go. He turns around and drives home. And over the next days, and then over the years, he works to make Stephen disappear for good. He scatters the remains. Later, he goes back and crushes the bones with a sledgehammer so no one can ever identify them. Stephen never makes it to the concert. He never makes it home. And for the next 13 years, his family has no idea what happened to him. This next stretch is the one people find hardest to sit with. After Stephen Hicks, for almost a decade, there is nothing that investigators were ever able to tie to another death. That fall, Dahmer enrolls at Ohio State University and drinks his way out of it in a single term, so his father pushes him toward the army. He enlists, trains as a medic, and gets stationed in West Germany. That doesn't last either. His drinking gets worse, and in 1981, the army discharges him for it. Back in the States, his father sends him to live with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin, just outside Milwaukee. And on the surface, it looks like a recovery. He has a stable place to live. Eventually, he finds steady work, including a night job mixing vats at a chocolate factory. He goes to church with his grandmother. Underneath, the warning signs keep surfacing, and the system keeps seeing them. In 1982, he's arrested for exposing himself at the state fair. In 1986, he's arrested again, this time after masturbating in front of two young boys near the river. That one gets him a year of probation and counseling. So, by the mid-1980s, Jeffrey Dahmer is already on record. He's already a name in a file. On paper, though, he's just a quiet guy with a couple of embarrassing incidents behind him, getting his life back together. And then, late in 1987, it starts again. And this time, it does not stop. November 20th, 1987. Dahmer is still living at his grandmother's house. He meets a 25-year-old man named Stephen Tuomi from Michigan at a bar, and the two of them go to the Ambassador Hotel, to a room Dahmer has rented for the night. They drink heavily. What happened in that room is, by Dahmer's own account, a blank. He would say he only meant to drug Tuomi, and that he woke up the next morning to find him dead, with no memory of having killed him. And I want to be clear that this is his version, given years later, by a man with every reason to shape the story. There was never physical evidence to test it against. What's not in doubt is what he did next, because it tells you how quickly this became routine for him. He had a body in a hotel room he had to check out of, so he walked out, went and bought a large suitcase, brought it back, put Tuomi's body inside it, and took it by cab to his grandmother's basement. Stephen Tuomi is the one death Jeffrey Dahmer would never be charged with. Not because there was any doubt he did it, but because all that ever existed was a confession and no evidence to build a case around. And after Tuomi, a pattern takes shape. You can see the machinery of it, where he looks, bars, bus stops, the big downtown mall, the places where a stranger can talk to a stranger and nobody thinks twice. What he offers: money, a few photos, a couple of hours. Where he takes them: at first his grandmother's house, and hotels, and eventually a place of his own. And who he targets. This part matters for everything that comes later. Most of the men Dahmer approached were young men of color, Black, Asian, and Latino, and many of them were gay. Several of them came from communities that were routinely underserved by the police. And in more than one case, relatives would later say their missing person reports were not treated with the urgency they deserved. He keeps killing at his grandmother's, quietly. A young man named James Doc Stater. A young man named Richard Guerrero. The bodies are dealt with down in the basement, and for a long time, nobody connects a thing. But the smells keep coming back, and his grandmother's unease grows, and eventually that pushes him to move out and get a place of his own. By the time he does, he's a man who has killed several people, and who has, so far, walked away clean from every single one of them. No suspect, no open case, nothing tying him to any of it. That is the man who is about to sign a lease on apartment 213, and it's worth stopping on that, because it means the system's best chance to stop Jeffrey Dahmer wasn't going to come from a murder investigation at all. It already had. And this is what makes the case so hard to forgive. Before apartment 213, Before most of the killings people remember, the justice system already had Jeffrey Dahmer in its hands, and it let him go. In 1988, living in his own apartment now, Dahmer approached a 13-year-old boy and offered him money to come back and pose for photographs. The boy went with him. Inside, Dahmer gave him a drink, and the drink was drugged. He photographed him, and he assaulted him. But the boy, groggy and disoriented, managed to get out and make it home, and his family got him to a hospital and called the police. On September 27, 1988, Dahmer was arrested. The boy's name was Somsak Synthesomphone. Hold on to that name. Dahmer was charged with second-degree sexual assault and with enticing a child. In January 1989, he pleaded guilty, and in May of 1989, he was sentenced. For drugging and assaulting a boy, he was given 5 years of probation and 1 year in a work release program, which meant he kept his job at the factory during the day and only reported back to custody at night. He'd asked the court to go easy on him, to let him keep working, and the court did. No real time in a state prison. A sentence built, more than anything, around not disrupting his life. So now he is a convicted sex offender, on probation, under court supervision. And during those exact years, while the state is supposedly watching him, Jeffrey Dahmer goes on killing. He kills before the sentence, and he kills after it. In 1990, he moves into apartment 213 in the Oxford Apartments, and once he has a place that's fully his, with a door that locks, the pace picks up. Keep the name Somsak in your head. Because in less than 3 years, this case is going to come back to his exact family, on a street corner, at 2 in the morning. It's the early morning of May 27, 1991. Earlier that night, Dahmer had brought a 14-year-old boy back to apartment 213 and drugged him. At some point, he left to buy beer and left the boy inside. And while he was gone, the boy got out. His name is Konarak Synthesomphone, and right now he is out on the street near 25th and State with no clothes on, dazed, bleeding, barely able to stand or speak. A few people notice him. 2 of them, Sandra Smith and her cousin Nicole Childress, stop to help. They can see he's young and that something is very wrong with him. Nicole runs to a payphone and calls 911. A fire department ambulance gets there first. One of the rescue workers takes a look at the boy and thinks he needs treatment. But before that can go anywhere, Dahmer comes back. He'd gone home, found the boy missing, and come out looking. And now he's on the street too, trying to steer Konarak away from the people helping him. Then the police pull up. Officers John Balcherzak and Joseph Gabrish, and they send the ambulance away. This is the moment the whole thing comes apart. Dahmer stays calm. He tells the officers the young man is a friend, a house guest who's just had too much to drink. He gives them a name, John Mung, and says he's 18 or 19 years old. Sandra Smith tries to stop it. She tells the officers plainly that the boy is a child, that he's hurt, that he'd been trying to get away from this man. She tells them she'd heard Dahmer call him by more than one name, and instead of listening to her, one of the officers threatens to arrest her. So, she backs off. The boy himself is too far gone to speak for himself, and the officers decide that Dahmer is the one telling the truth. So they walk Dahmer and Konarak back up to apartment 213. Inside, they find the boy's clothes and photographs Dahmer had taken of him. To the officers, that settles it. 2 adults, a relationship, a private argument. There's a smell in the apartment. One of them glances toward the bedroom, but by his own account later, doesn't really look. and then they leave. They tell Dahmer to take care of him. They write the call up as a domestic dispute between two adults, and they drive off. They have just handed a 14-year-old child back to the man who took him, because that is who Konarak was, 14 years old, a Laotian kid, and the younger brother of Samsak, the boy Dahmer had been convicted of assaulting less than 3 years earlier. The same family, twice. About 30 minutes after those officers pulled away, Jeffrey Dahmer killed him. For the officers, the call was closed. For one woman, it wasn't. Her name is Glenda Cleveland. She's Sandra's mother and Nicole's aunt. That night, when the girls came home shaken by what they'd seen, they asked her to call the police, and she did. And on the recording of that call, you can hear an officer brushing her off. "It's a boyfriend thing," he tells her. "The boy isn't a boy at all. He's a grown man, and the whole thing's been taken care of." Glenda doesn't accept that. She keeps pressing him. "Are you sure?" she asks. "Are you sure he's an adult?" And she gets the same answer every time. Then, a few days later, she opens a newspaper and sees a face she recognizes. A 14-year-old boy, Konarak Sinthasomphone, reported missing. It's the boy from that night, the one the police walked back inside. So she calls again. She tells them the missing child and the boy from the street are the same person. She would later say she also reached out to the FBI. She does just about everything an ordinary person can do when they know, in their gut, that something is wrong. And still, nothing happens. And she wasn't the only one trying to be heard. For months, people in Dahmer's building had been complaining about the smell coming out of apartment 213. He always had an explanation ready. A freezer that broke down, meat gone bad, a problem with the pipes. And he was polite enough, unremarkable enough, that people kept taking him at his word. So the pieces were all there, out in the open, held by different people who couldn't get anyone to connect them. A drugged child out on the street. A neighbor who would not stop calling. A missing person report with a matching face. A smell no excuse could quite cover. No investigation put those pieces together in time. And in the weeks that followed, before anyone finally acted, 4 more men would die. Which brings us all the way back to July 22nd, 1991. To Tracy Edwards on that street corner with a handcuff on his wrist. To 2 officers walking into apartment 213 and opening a drawer. Now you know what they walked into. Over the next few days, Dahmer talked. He walked investigators through it over hours of interviews, calmly and in detail, name by name, place by place. He confessed to a string of killings going all the way back to that summer in Ohio in 1978. 17 in all. What he laid out was 13 years long. And that's the thing to sit with when you think about that night. Tracy Edwards didn't overpower a serial killer. He kept a stranger talking for 4 hours, told him what he wanted to hear, and waited for 1 second of distraction. Then he threw a single punch and ran. And in doing that, one man, with no idea of the scale of what he was inside of, ended something that 13 years, several arrests, a probation officer, a missing persons report, and 2 officers on a street corner had not. Which is why this was never really the story of how Jeffrey Dahmer was caught. It's the story of how many times he almost was and wasn't. Before we get to the trial, there's something we have to do, because it's easy, in a case like this, to let the victims collapse into a single number. 17, a body count, a line in a headline. They weren't a number. They were 17 separate people, with families and futures, and ordinary lives they were still living, right up until the day they crossed paths with Jeffrey Dahmer. Stephen Hicks was 18, fresh out of high school, hitchhiking to a concert on a summer afternoon. Anthony Sears was 24. He wanted to be a model. He had a job at a restaurant, a girlfriend, plans. Errol Lindsay was 19. His girlfriend was pregnant when he died. He had a daughter he would never get to meet. Tony Hughes was 31, and he was deaf. His mother remembered him as outgoing and full of life, the kind of person who made friends everywhere he went. David Thomas was a father. Oliver Lacey was engaged to be married. Eddie Smith's family said he dreamed of being a model too, and two of them were children. James Dockstader was 14. Conorak Synthasimphone was 14. There's one more thing worth being precise about, because the numbers in this case get muddled. Dahmer confessed to 17 murders, but he was convicted of 16, 15 in Wisconsin and 1 in Ohio. The 17th, Stephen Tuomi, was never charged because there wasn't enough physical evidence to prove it in court, even though Dahmer admitted to it. So, the figure you'll see depends on whether you're counting confessions or convictions. Either way, behind every one of those numbers is a name, and they deserve to be said out loud. Stephen Hicks, Stephen Tuomi, James Dockstader, Richard Guerrero, Anthony Sears, Raymond Smith, Edward Smith, Ernest Miller, David Thomas, Curtis Straughter, Errol Lindsay, Tony Hughes, Conorak Synthasimphone, Matt Turner, Jeremiah Weinberger, Oliver Lacey, Joseph Braidhoft, 17 of them, most of them young, most of them men of color, and many of them gay. And that's part of why this story still matters. Not because of what Jeffrey Dahmer was, but because of who the people he killed were, and how easy it turned out to be for far too long to look away from them. Dahmer's case went to trial in early 1992. He had already pleaded guilty to 15 murders in Wisconsin, so the trial wasn't about whether he'd done it. It was about whether he was legally sane when he did. His lawyers argued he wasn't, that he'd been driven by a compulsion he couldn't control. The jury didn't agree. They found him legally sane. On February 17, 1992, he was given 15 consecutive life sentences. A couple of months later, an Ohio court added a 16th for the murder of Stephen Hicks back in 1978. He was never getting out. In November 1994, he was killed by another inmate in prison. But the story doesn't quite end with Dahmer. Think back to the two officers who walked Conorak back to that apartment, John Bolserzak and Joseph Gabrish. When the 911 tape from that night became public, along with the remarks the officers had made, the case became a national scandal. Both officers were fired, and Milwaukee's Fire and Police Commission initially upheld that decision. But after they appealed, a circuit judge ruled that dismissal was too severe. The commission then replaced the firings with 60-day unpaid suspensions, and both officers returned to the force. One of them, Balkerzak, would later be elected president of the Milwaukee Police Union and stayed on the force until he retired in 2017. Conorak was not saved. The officers who returned him to Dahmer eventually returned to the force. It's easy, with a case like this, to make Jeffrey Dahmer the whole story. The quiet monster, the horror behind the door. Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for every one of these murders. Nobody made him do what he did. But the record also shows there were moments, real ones, when someone in a position of authority could have stopped him and didn't. So it's worth remembering the others. Tracy Edwards, who kept his head and walked out alive. Glenda Cleveland, Sandra Smith, and Nicole Childress, who tried to save a child when the people in charge wouldn't listen. And the 17 young men and boys whose names deserve to outlast the name of the man who killed them. Konarak Synthesamphone was 14 years old. He wasn't invisible. He was seen. He was reported. And he was sent back.